Join me once again to talk about Star Wars. I have Jeff from the Death Star Human Resources Department. Jeff,
Yeah,
thanks for
so
joining.
yeah, thanks for having me. This is a good, nice little break in the weekday. Yak about Star Wars for 45 minutes or so.
Absolutely. This is like I was thinking about this earlier. This is like the joining of the two towers, right? Combining our forces. But yeah, I thought we would just run through some stuff from Celebration because last time we talked, Celebration was yet to happen. So we briefly run through some Celebration stuff and then really get into the meat of it, which is what I'm dying to talk about is Andor
Oh,
season
of
two,
course.
of course. So Celebration came and went. There wasn't a lot that was announced that was juicy or interesting, I guess. So Mandalorian and Grogu, we're getting that movie next year, which I think we already knew.
Yeah, that was one that yeah, the date was confirmed, has been confirmed on that one. I think the big takeaway from Celebration, as far as I know, is the people who were there got to see a trailer
Yeah.
or at least some footage out of it.
Yep.
As far as I know, it hasn't leaked, or if it's leaked, it's the Disney people are on top of that stuff pretty quickly.
I think on Reddit I saw a really like crappy potato quality version, and I said I'm just gonna wait until
Yeah,
the real thing's on YouTube.
yeah, I saw. I think I had it in Death Star HR last week or the week before. There was a picture of Mando and Zeb, I think,
Mhm,
but again,
yes.
it was
Yep.
out of focus, taken with a Motorola Razor camera.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those. I think the movie will be fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think what was interesting was so I watched most of I didn't go to Tokyo, so I wasn't there in person. But I watched most of the footage on YouTube, and
mhm,
what was interesting that I thought was John Favreau, the showrunner, the creator of the character. He said the movie was a story they had to tell on the big screen.
mhm,
So to me, that indicates it's probably going to be more on the epic scale, more on the Star Wars scale that we're
mhm,
used to. Because the question coming into it is like, we have this show, Mandalorian. It's been phenomenal. Its home is on Disney Plus. Why do we need a
mhm.
movie? I think he realizes that question is on all of our minds. So the idea that he's addressing that sort of directly although he's not telling us anything, right?
Right.
But I think we can expect something on the traditional Star Wars scale of battles and epicness.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. I mean, as something we maybe get into a little bit later, but I went and saw Revenge of the Sith this weekend, and
Hmm.
it just reminded me of that Star Wars is meant to be seen on the big screen.
Yeah. Yep.
Like,
Yep.
you know, I love being able to sit on my couch and watch Mando, or watch a couple episodes of the Clone Wars if I just don't have anything going on with my day. But to watch it on the big screen is just great. So I think you're probably right. It's going to be more of a, I don't know, epic adventure. I think, yeah, you're probably right. Like, that's just going to be the good way to put it. We'll get some space battles and, maybe a big army of Mandalorians fighting, I don't know, pirates or whoever
Right.
it is, whatever they choose to do with the story. Um, yeah, it'll be like an episode of Mando, but bigger.
Yeah. Bigger and hopefully better. But it's a
Yeah,
high bar. It's a high bar. Season
it
one,
is a high
season two
bar.
are outstanding.
I've wondered for a while, and you and I may have talked about this when we talked last time. Is this going to be kind of, I don't know. Have they said if they're doing season four? Like, it keeps going kind of back and forth.
I mean, well, Lucasfilm announces projects and then just quietly quits them. So they may have
Right.
announced it and then just kind of shuttered it. Um,
Yeah.
my
I
my
mean,
take is that this movie is season four essentially until we
that's
hear
kind
otherwise.
that's kind of what I've assumed, and I kind of figured my assumption has been that Favreau and Filoni, they want something more in Mando leading into the Filoni-verse movie.
Yeah,
The one that's going to kind of wrap up Ahsoka and Mando and whatever other, maybe Skeleton Crew, maybe Book of Boba Fett. Whatever it is. So he must feel that we need something else.
yeah,
So maybe this will be kind of um Sorry, just had a
Uh,
call.
that's all right.
Yeah, I didn't know what happened to my screen there. That he'll use this to kind of wrap up, I don't know, the individual Mando story and then take it into the kind of wrap up movie.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, and this we can maybe touch on this later when we talk about Andor, but I've been thinking about, and I'm actually writing a piece um, that really is about why the title of it I'm still working on, but it's really why is it that the best Star Wars is being created by someone who is not a Star Wars fan, and by that I mean Andor. It is
Right.
interesting. We're at this interesting place with Star Wars where you've got on one side you've got Favreau and Filoni who are super fans. They're
Yes.
like you or me if we were creating Star Wars. This is
Yes.
what we
Yeah.
would be doing
Exactly.
probably.
Exactly.
And then the other side you've got Tony Gilroy who is he has said he is not a fan, and because of that he's treating Star Wars differently than we've traditionally seen, and the fruit of that has been Andor, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But it is interesting that Filoni and Favreau are going all in on the what we're calling the Filoni verse or the Mando verse, right?
Yeah.
And but in my opinion, the best Star Wars is what's happening over and off to the side in the Gilroy verse that just happens to take place in Star Wars.
I think you're absolutely right about that. And here would be my initial reaction is, obviously you and I are both Detroit Tigers fans, and it's, any sports fan does this, don't matter what team you root for, you overvalue your players.
Yeah,
You think your players are maybe not the best ones, but you look at them either better, you look at them less critically, whatever it is. And I think Gilroy, by not being part of, the Lucasfilm family or the Disney family, by not being a a super fan like Dave Filoni clearly is, and John Favreau as well,
yeah,
he's able to say, you know, I can tell this story that is not a Star Wars story. It's a story that takes place in the Star Wars universe. And he's not either beholden to what he expects fan service to be, or just not beholden to kind of his own, you know, memories or what he loves about Star Wars. Like, if you and I were John Favreau and Dave Filoni, and somebody came to us and said, "I want to do 8 episodes about a gonk droid," you and I would greenlight that in a heartbeat. No questions asked. Whereas I think if you went to Tony Gilroy and said, "Hey, you know, why don't you put a why don't you put the gonk droid from the Sandcrawler in here for just a little fan service?" He's probably gonna tell him, "Get the hell out of here! I'm not doing that. I'm
yeah,
telling a serious story."
yep,
Um, and I don't say that to disparage Filoni and Favreau. They are good storytellers and have their own kind of take on it, what they want Star Wars to be. But I think when you're looking at it from an outsider like Gilroy is, you can
hmm
kind of strip away the mythology, strip away the mystique, and just get down to what you want.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think it worked too. But sorry.
No,
That
you're good.
it could have gone horribly wrong.
Yeah,
You know, you could put it in somebody's hands who isn't a fan of Star Wars, and it could turn out really bad.
yeah, yeah. But it is interesting. I read a review that in the Hollywood Reporter that Gilroy he did an interview with them around the time of season one,
Hmm.
and he was saying that with Star Wars, when people come into it, actors, directors, writers, whatever, even unintentionally, they change. They like
Hmm.
kind of change. They give what they think Star Wars should be, and Gilroy's point was, no, like we're hiring you because of who you are and what you bring. We don't want you to
Hmm.
change that. And it is just, I think Star Wars is an interesting crossroads because, in my opinion, like Andor is the best thing that's come out of Star Wars since The Empire Strikes Back.
Hmm.
And on the other token, like the fan service, the fan servicification of Star Wars, I think is destroying it. And there's a time and place for it, but when fan service is both the ends and the means,
Hmm.
then like I don't know, like, like, season 3 of The Mandalorian and, like, parts of Ahsoka, like, they lost me because it became less about the story and more about, you know, pleasing the uber fans
Hmm.
like, with plot developments or callbacks or whatever, and I feel like Andor is just pure storytelling, and
Hmm.
that's really and obviously, like, I'm approaching Star Wars as a 40-year-old man, which is a totally different point of view than I would have had as a child, which George
Right.
Lucas famously says Star Wars is for children, or those of us who still are children, I guess. But
We're large adult sons at this point.
exactly.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right about that. And I know you and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. It's that Disney has so many different audiences. They've got the people
Yeah.
like us, they've got the new fans they're trying to bring in, they've got the people who, are younger than us who came in as, the prequels were their
Mhm.
introduction to Star Wars, or, and they grew up on that in the Clone Wars.
Yep.
So, it's one of those where how do you how do you satisfy so many disparate groups of people and ultimately still make money? 'Cause I mean, ultimately,
Yeah.
Kathleen Kennedy and John Favreau and Dave Filoni, they have to answer to Bob Iger, who has to answer to the shareholders. So it's like, where do you only have so much money to go around. And like I said, I know you and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. If you only have so much money to go around, you
Yeah.
know, and you have a quarterly stock report, you're going to put it into what you feel is the safest. And I think, when it was just Lucas, when it was just Uncle George running the show, you know, I don't think Lucasfilm was a public company. I don't actually know that.
I think they were always private until he sold to Disney.
I think you are right, and it's one of those where yes, he obviously has to make money to
Yeah.
further his projects, but in the end, he can say, if George wanted 8 episodes about a Gonk droid, it's going to get done,
Yeah.
assuming he can afford it. I mean, the Star Wars Underworld stuff just came back up a few weeks ago, and it was one of those where we wanted to do it and we just couldn't afford it. And I'd read something interesting. I don't know, it was a while ago, maybe last year, where it was basically they did the special editions back in what, 97
Mhm.
to more or less finance the prequels.
Yeah.
Like that was so it's one of those where Disney has, multiple audiences, multiple partners they have to satisfy. George just, I just got to have the money to do it.
George just needed to satisfy himself.
Hmm.
Yep.
We could all be so lucky to have that
We
sandbox to play in.
exactly. All right, let me just quickly touch on the rest of the stuff that came out of Celebration, and then we'll dive into more Andor. The big thing for me was Starfighter, which
Hmm.
new film directed by Sean Levy, who recently did Deadpool and Wolverine.
Hmm.
Ryan Gosling is attached, which I think you pointed this out in the newsletter, and I think it's true. This might be the first time we've ever had a star attached to a Star Wars project, like when they announced it, as though
Yeah.
like this is part of the draw. Like Ryan Gosling, or
Yeah.
not Ryan Gosling, versus when the Phantom Menace they cast Samuel L. Jackson like well into it or whatever. Felt like maybe a subtle shift there with using Gosling to build up some buzz, and because we know nothing about this movie
Right. Yeah. I think
other than the title.
I think the only thing I remember reading, and I don't remember if I saw this on a video or just an article, is it's post Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, which is where I
But
want. Like, let's push the
yeah,
timeline out.
yeah.
Let's stop being confined by what's come before, and let's blaze
uh,
new territory.
Just
Uh,
let the past die.
yes, thank you. One thing that I listened to the interview. One thing that I really did like, Sean Levy said. I have a quote here. He said, "This is not a prequel. It's not a sequel. It gives us the Star Wars DNA we love with an adventure that's all new." And like that's like checks all my boxes. It kind of
Hmm.
reminded me of like season 1 of The Mandalorian, where it was familiar but new. Like it
Yes.
stormtroopers and stuff we recognize, but it's all brand new characters, brand new story, and it's basically what I've wanted. Andor, aside from Andor, which has been a pleasant surprise, it's what I've
Right.
wanted for Star Wars basically forever.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. It's where let's try something that's not the Skywalker saga.
Yes.
And, trying something that's not the Skywalker saga, that's not, a Mando spin-off or Ahsoka or anything. And again, it's not that I don't like those. It's just we got to you have this big sandbox to play in and let's try something new. And I guess I do applaud Disney for, you
Yeah.
know, we're going to say, "Hey, we're doing something brand new." It's not just, "All right, we're going straight to, episode 10."
Yep.
So yeah, I'm pretty excited for that one. Did they put the release date out
They
there?
did 2 years away, so May 2027, which
Okay.
is gonna come quick. Um,
Yeah, really.
so yeah, so all we have is a title, a director, an actor, and like I said, not even like a log line or anything, but just vibes. So it's called Starfighter. I assume this is a prequel to the last Starfighter, the 1980s film.
The crossover we didn't know we were waiting for.
Exactly. Let's see. So the other thing that was announced that kind of piqued my interest was Maul Shadow Lord, which is a
Mhm.
animated series. Takes place after the Clone Wars. It's supposed to be about how Maul builds his criminal empire, which we kind of get a teaser of in the Solo movie when he has that cameo towards the end that goes nowhere. And it
Yeah,
seems it seems to me like I do wonder when they announced the project. I am excited about it. I do wonder when we as a society will kind of move on from Darth Maul because it does seem like we're rather preoccupied with the character. I don't know if it's because of the horns. I don't know if it's because of the face. I don't know if it's because of the lightsaber. I assume
I
it's
mean,
just because he died too soon. Like George Lucas introduced this amazing character and then kills him,
right.
and we didn't get our fill. We wanted more, and so we keep going back to the well.
I always said that Darth Maul's uh importance on the Phantom Menace poster compared to his importance in the movie, like the proportions were way off. I
Yes.
think I think there's a Legends book called Shadow Warrior, Darth Maul.
Shadow something. Yeah, I've
Shadow
read it.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm looking at my Legends books and I think I can see it, but I can't read the title. It's too far away. I know that, he's got like there's like 2 or 3 Maul books. I know there's
Yeah.
for sure 2.
Yes.
I mean, it'll be fun. I'll watch
Yeah.
it.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think I was thinking about this when it was announced, and it was kind of Darth Maul. They did the same thing that they did with Mando and Grogu. Where it was you learned Maul was alive in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
But if you're just somebody who just watches the movies, like I don't think when Solo came out, I don't know if I'd watch all of the Clone Wars at that point. And when that scene at the end where he pops off, I was like, whoa, wait, where'd you come from?
Right.
It's like if all you ever did was watch Mando, you'd be like, wait, why are Mando and Grogu back together again?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that was basically it for Celebration. I think the big thing for me, and you and I talked a couple weeks ago, and we laid out the fact that Lucasfilm has all these projects they've announced that are, I don't
Hmm.
want to say they're in limbo, but we don't know where they are, other than
Yeah.
Grogu and Mandalorian essentially, and then the Sean Levy project.
Oh, and
Um,
Ahsoka season 2 has just
Ahsoka
started
season
filming,
two, yeah,
supposedly.
that's in
I
prep.
know.
They did start shooting that, yeah.
Yeah, and I know at Celebration there was a trailer of sorts. I think it was just like still photos. But I
Yeah.
know there was the one of Chopper with the machine gun. I was like, oh yeah, war crimes are so back, baby.
Yep. But I think I guess my sense was I was a little disappointed we didn't get anything. So there are, not counting Mandalorian and Grogu and Starfighter, there are 8 other films that Lucasfilm has announced in years previous that
Right.
are more or less still in limbo because we didn't get any kind of update. We don't know if they're
I
still in progress. We don't know if they're canceled or just quietly quit. Don't
I am a
know.
little I am a little surprised there wasn't anything about the Ray movie because they've been
Yeah,
talking that one up for a couple years. And I mean, I know, they're on like I don't know, fourth writer, I think. Third
yeah.
or fourth writer.
Not good. Not good.
Not good. Yeah, not good. Um, but I am surprised there wasn't even a oh, we've got the bones of the story. Daisy Ridley would do a YouTube video and to appear and say, hey, I've read it and I love it. know,
Yeah,
I'm surprised there wasn't anything about that. That
yeah,
was thinking about it now is actually kind of the biggest surprise of what was left out.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, maybe this is Lucasfilm learning their lesson in which we don't say anything unless we know something is there. I do think they got
Yeah,
a little project happy, a little trigger happy with announcing projects.
I
But
mean, it's one of those. I went back and I think you and I talked about this, or maybe I talked about it with Shane Elliott when we did a pod a couple weeks ago. But it was like if you go back with that D23 where they announced like 10 projects or whatever,
mhm,
most of them have come to fruition in one form or
yeah,
another.
yep,
I think Rangers of the New Republic obviously did not happen. Um, and even if they haven't, like Lando obviously has not come to fruition, but there's very, very, very slow progress on it. Or there's at least news on it that it's
yeah.
moving in a direction that is not canceled.
They're doing something. It was a film, then it was
Yes.
a TV show. Now it's a film
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
It's like the Michael Scott vasectomy thing, right? It's supposedly happening. Let's talk Andor. Season
Yes.
two has started, and in fact, the next three episodes are going to drop tonight. So
Yes.
plenty of time to get caught up still. But Prestige Star Wars is back, uh, and I'm excited. Season one
Yes.
picks up, or season two picks up a year after the events of season one, so it's a bit of a time jump. Get used to that feeling because we're gonna go
Yeah.
undergo it a lot during the season. And by the way, of course I did. I rewatched season one before season two came out.
Mhm.
Because I mean, of
Right.
course I did.
Exactly. No, I did the same thing.
But I will say that even though I did watch season two, my wife hadn't didn't, or even though I rewatched season one, my wife did not. So I threw on the season one recap on Disney
Mhm.
Plus. Highly recommend it, even if you've seen
No.
season one, because it's like maybe 8 minutes of highlights, and it's rather emotional. It was
Mhm.
it was really effective, like propaganda, indoor propaganda.
the
Uh,
the Empire propaganda people would have been proud.
yes, yes. So yeah, so season it's interesting. Season one was really about how Cassian becomes a rebel. Like
Mhm.
that's the through line of the show. I would
Mhm.
say early on in season two, it feels like the through line is more about how the Empire becomes the Empire and the
Mhm.
rebels become the rebellion. Because in season, and that might sound a little weird because we had Order 66, right? We
Mhm.
had the Empire declaring, or the Emperor declaring himself the Emperor. So at that point, you have an empire, but it's not yet the empire that we know and love to hate from like back in
Right.
1977. At this point in the timeline, they still have to step carefully. The Senate's still in play. Like there's even a
Mhm.
line about how the emperor has to get like budget approvals for things, which just seems crazy. I mean, it sounds familiar
Right.
if you're thinking about like contemporary comparisons. But at this point in the timeline, the empire is not this all encompassing, all powerful organization. And so they still have to abide by the rules to some extent,
Mhm.
which is why there's this interesting plot line related to this Gorman project, is what I'm going to call it, I guess, where you have a bunch of imperial folks in a conference room just casually discussing war crimes, and
Right.
it all has to be off the books because like they are afraid of getting found out what will happen. So, but I think it's funny because it requires a little bit of a perception shift because you think of the Empire as star destroyers and stormtroopers, and they might makes right,
Mhm.
but that's we're not quite there yet in the timeline, and this show is really about how it's really about bridging the gap from uh, when Palpatine takes power to the Empire that we all know from way back in the day.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I think
likewise with the rebels, who apparently are not, they're a bunch of like redneck rebels, is what I call them.
yeah, the ones on Yavin 4 were not exactly very well organized. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good way to put it. And I think my one takeaway from kind of the Gorman plotting is that, meetings are the root of all evil. Like nothing good comes
nothing
from
good,
meetings.
nothing
Yeah.
good comes out of a
Yeah,
meeting. That's
always
absolutely
reject,
true.
if you take that meeting, you take a meeting thinking it's going to be fine. Next thing you know, you're committing genocide. Like just reject the Outlook invite.
Right.
But yeah, no, I thought I think that's a really good way to put it, that the Empire is not the Empire yet.
Mhm.
You know, Palpatine, there's nominally still democracy.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, it is interesting also, you know, because I guess, 77, the original trilogy, the rebels are all on the same page. You
exactly. They've
know,
got a
you real
uniform and everything.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And you don't really see, I guess maybe the Clone Wars cartoon would be the first. I think that's where Saw Gerrera is introduced, if I
Y
remember
yeah,
correctly.
yeah,
Yes, so that's kind of the, and I think he's young at that point though. And
he is.
it's tough with Forrest Whitaker because I know he's pretty old, and
Yeah.
they're just de-aging the heck out of him. Like that takes a lot of computing power. No offense to Forrest Whitaker, I think he's a fantastic actor. I really like him. But I was like, man, it was a little more believable in Rogue One.
Yeah.
A lot less de-aging needed to be done. But yeah, no, I think it's pretty interesting. I think I said this somewhere on Substack that I think Deidre and Cyril are going to be low key the most interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, season
I
1 hinted at something being there, and I
hmm
guess in the year since we left these characters, fascist love has bloomed because now they've moved in together, and not only that, but the mother-in-law is coming over for dinner, and it's so deliciously awkward,
yes,
and it's funny too, just like when Deidre is like trying to figure out what to wear, and then she practices smiling
I
because
loved that
she's
part.
not
I
used to.
loved that part. She's like, my face hurts.
Yeah, exactly.
I I wonder, and I have no idea if this would happen, but I wonder if one of them is going to get disenchanted with the Empire. Because right now,
Yeah.
season one and right now, they're both true believers.
Yep.
We found out that Dedra was, basically raised in an Imperial orphanage. You know, and Cyril just wants approval from a authority figure. Doesn't matter who it is. So I just wonder though if we're gonna see, maybe after, however much of the Gorman massacre we're going to end up seeing, I just wonder if one of them is going to be like, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah, I think they seed that a little bit with Dedra in this
Hmm.
first couple episodes, which I like that because it offers the opportunity or the suggestion that she's going to have a character arc. She's not necessarily just going to be like towing the line and
Hmm.
repeating the company mantra. She seemed to want no part of the Gorman massacre that we know that's going to happen. Like she wants
Right.
no part of planning it. I don't know that she's like just wants to be like all about the traditional like trad wife, like she just wants the quiet life with Cyril, or she's
Right.
just had a. But I do wonder if the relationship has so we find out in this the first couple episodes that she was essentially raised by the Empire
Yeah.
from like from not from birth but from a very young age, so she's always been about the Empire is
Hmm.
mom and dad to her essentially. um and which then means that her concept of like relationships and loves is going to be rather skewed, and
Yeah.
now she has this relationship with Cyril who is also rather messed up, but it does beg the question, like, has she discovered something beyond the Empire
Right.
that is opening her eyes up to what it means when you are oppressive and you're killing people and stuff, people who love other people. And
Yeah.
I do think I don't know if she's gonna go full. I don't think she'll go full rebel, but it does beg the question, like if this is where they're starting, like where are they gonna end up? Because if they start together, I don't think they're gonna end together.
No,
And I think
maybe
I could see this brewing rebellion being what drives them apart
it would be a Shakespearean tragedy
for sure.
of
Yeah,
sorts.
yeah.
Well,
Cyril will have to go back to eating that gross looking cereal.
well, let me ask you this: out of the four, basically the plot points, we had Cassian
Yep,
stealing the tie,
yep,
Cyril and Dedra playing house,
yep.
Mon Mothma's wedding planning,
Hmm.
and the entire planet made up of wheat. Um,
Yes.
it's
I was
something
waiting for the Russell Crowe cameo where he's just walking through the field, draping his hand across the top of the wheat.
what what storyline did you think worked the best for the first three
Uh,
episodes?
That's a good question. I think so. Cassie, it's interesting. Cassian was largely sidelined in his own
Hmm.
show for the first three episodes, and I dug it. Other than the fact that we'll touch on this later, like the redneck rebels part of it started to wear on me a little bit. I did like how the first episode starts, and
Hmm.
it's we know Cassian is like the super rebel, like he's their best asset at this point. He's like super spy, and I love that he gets in a TIE fighter and he has no idea how to fly it. And
That was good.
it's I don't know, have you ever played Rocket League?
No.
Okay. Well, it's a video game where you play RC cars that are playing soccer essentially. So you're driving around RC cars and trying to knock a soccer ball into a net.
Okay.
I'm terrible at it. I drive my RC car like Andor flies that TIE fighter. I'm all over the place. There's even a point where the stormtroopers walk in and they're just like looking at the TIE fighter crashing against the ceiling and stuff. I
Yeah,
imagine
they're just
that's
like,
what everyone else is doing when I'm playing Rocket League. They're just like, what is this guy doing? Because I am all over the place. I clearly have not played that game enough. But I did like that it's not assumed that he's just gonna know how to fly this TIE fighter, this
right,
experimental craft. And it actually becomes a plot point because later on nobody can fly it. So
right.
they're all stuck.
Yeah, I thought, and I know I wrote about this with the redneck rebels. I like that. I think they're coming back,
Oh
and
yeah.
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 I mean, obviously, nothing in this show is done by accident.
Right.
They would
Yeah.
not introduce these characters as just kind of quasi comic relief, and then without some kind of purpose. So
Yep.
I said this is what I wrote, and I know I'm not the first person to think of this. This is not an original idea by me, but they are going to, when Dedra said, "Oh, we need some rebels on Gorman to legitimize, dropping a garrison," you don't want some rebels there that can actually like beat you, you
Right.
know,
Right.
that are actually going to rally and inspire the Gormans. You need to inspire them just a little bit to justify the stormtroopers. And if she needs a group of rebels that are long on passion and short on competence, that's a pretty good group for that.
Yeah, we know exactly who she needs.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. Everything, just going back to season one, nothing happens by coincidence or happenstance. Like everything is used or for it's there for a reason.
Hmm.
Uh, they do need sacrificial lambs, and
Yeah.
I'm okay with these idiots being slaughtered. Like they
Luthen would get rid of them in a heartbeat. He'd be like, "These
absolutely,
guys are idiots, and they're gonna get us all exposed." He
yeah,
might give them to the Empire.
yeah. One of the things. So I'm going to answer your question. You asked me what my favorite thing was. It's actually the Empire stuff, but I'm going to come back to that. You just mentioned Luthen. I think there's the show continues to seed what I think is going to be Luthen's destruction, and it's the
Hmm.
fact that he cannot sit still when he knows a mission is in play. He constantly wants to know what's going on. He wants to. I feel like he's going to start taking risks in order to like he needs to be plugged in, and I feel like he's going to unintentionally expose himself at some point because he has such a problem sitting still
Hmm.
that it just feels like at some point that's going to be what exposes him to the empire is the fact that he's on a comm that's unsecured or something because he needs to know what Cassian's
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. He's definitely a micromanager.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Mon is like cool as a cucumber. I mean, so to speak. Like she's tore up about what happens, but yeah, I think my favorite thing from these first three episodes has just been the empire of it. I think
Hmm.
that meeting room, the boardroom, is just such a good scene. Um, it just really establishes like how the banality of evil, just
Hmm.
how you
Hmm.
can sit around a boardroom and even they get up and have a break and they're eating these little pastries while just casually discussing genocide and like why this method won't work, but maybe we should try this thing. And even too, when Krennic is talking about even among this council room, these should all be true believers in
Hmm.
like let's just crush everybody. He's even pitching it as talks about energy independence. And my question is like from what or from whom? Because you're the Empire, and like how could like who are you beholden to? But then also
Right.
he mentions it's all double speak because he talks about how they want access to like stable, unlimited power, which of course Palpatine says he wants unlimited power.
Right, yeah, no, I got that.
And so that they can be like have a good economy and like for like security purposes, and it all just sounds like political doublespeak and is super familiar to like a lot of stuff we're hearing like today,
Yes.
and it is kind of scary how much of this show mirrors what's happening in America today with like on the farm planet you've got these
Mhm.
people who are undocumented workers who are afraid of being rounded up because they don't have paperwork, they don't have visas, and it's obviously it's kind of a coincidence because they were working on the show 2 years ago, but at the same time, like the fact that this is where we are in America and this is going down
Right, I mean,
Star Wars.
yeah, no, it definitely is, a reflection of our current times, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Yeah,
How much I don't know if Tony Gilroy has said, like, how intentional it is. I would imagine it's at least somewhat intentional.
yeah,
But yeah, no, the farm plan I thought was a great example. I mean, I live in Texas. We have a large
hmm,
undocumented population that does a lot of those sort of jobs.
yep.
And I don't know what's going on in, like, the farming communities now with everything that's happening in our country, but I'm sure it's something people are thinking about. And it just shows as well, you know, with the Empire and just the unchecked power that even, a random lieutenant on some backwater planet, probably out in the outer rim. I don't know if they've said where it is, that, he just feels he can do whatever he wants and there's really no consequences.
And he's not wrong. That's the
No.
thing, and that's why like it was interesting. You bring that up. The assault on Bix was on one hand felt like it is. It's something we have never seen in Star Wars before.
Yeah.
And that she says rape, which is a word that doesn't, to this point, has never existed in Star Wars before. Like it's
No.
never been uttered. Like sex, if it happens in Star Wars, happens way off screen.
Right.
And so the fact that they put that in the show, and it's really, I think we always have known that the Empire is all about raping and pillaging, but it's been more metaphorical and maybe
Hmm.
like an environmental thing.
Yeah.
But this, they made it really personal. And I think it was a bit of a brave choice. I think it's clear. I mean, Andor is meant for, you can say it's meant for adults, but it's definitely a more mature viewing. It's not the Star Wars you grew up on. It's not the Star Wars I
Yeah.
grew up on.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of why I like it because it is realistic. This is what would happen. This is what does happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think you're right that it basically takes the Empire, like in season one when you see Canary, that the Empire, basically pillaged the planet and destroyed it
yep,
and, wrote it off as, oh, it was a mining accident.
yep,
Um, you have that on such a large scale, and then you shrink it down so much that you have, one Imperial officer who wants to assault one person
yep,
because he can.
yes,
And you see, uh I don't want to say the degrees of evil, but kind of, I guess, the scope of it.
yeah,
That it can go all the way from one person to one planet to, a whole galaxy.
yes, yep, absolutely. And I think it too, it shows that fighting back or rebelling is it is we talk about the rebellion being this organization in the future with uniforms and x-wings and stuff,
Hmm.
but it starts with individual acts of saying no and fighting back. In the case of Bix, like she fights back
Yeah.
and kills him unintentionally, but um I think it all ties together to tell a cohesive story about um where we're at in the galaxy, what's happening, and it yeah, I don't know. Like I started rewatching it in anticipation of this talk because
Hmm.
there's things you missed the first time,
Yeah.
and I guess that's what I continue to be struck by is just the subtext and the care with which Gilroy is telling this story,
Hmm.
um, and even the Bix plot line. Like she starts out these 3 episodes, she's still traumatized by
Hmm.
what the last Imperial dude did to her in
Right.
season
Yeah.
one, and here she kind of gets to complete that arc because she gets to fight back and she saves herself. I'm glad the show didn't do the typical thing of having Cassian show up to save the day.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
saved herself, and yeah, I mean it's
It
such a good
wasn't.
show.
it was incredibly satisfying when he showed back up with the tie and just like,
Oh, of course.
hit the
Yes.
troopers with the missile or
Yes,
whatever he
that was
used there.
awesome when he figured out how
Yeah.
to drive it. I guess what else did you as we touched on a lot of different plot lines, was there anything else from these first 3 episodes that you really loved?
I I really loved Genevieve O'Reilly's performance. I
Yeah.
thought she was just absolutely fantastic. As somebody who, she has enough things to juggle just in her day-to-day life, as she's the senator, she's funding
Yep.
rebellion, she's got, her home life, like she's those three things going on. And then to add in, she's got this wedding that she does not really approve of, but I mean, she basically sold her daughter out for the rebellion.
Yep.
I mean, that's that's really, it's a true believer and, kind of a Dedra level,
Yep.
just on the opposite side. And, I thought the moment, where she tells her daughter, like, you don't have to do this, it is pretty heavily implied that her marriage to Perrin was an arranged marriage. I don't think they
Yep.
ever explicitly said it, but it's certainly pretty heavily implied
Yep.
that, marriage that her mother did not seem to approve of it, just based on the fact that, well, my grandma got drunk at the wedding. And, when she tells her daughter, like, you can go out there and just say, we're not doing this. Everybody go home, everybody have a drink, whatever it is. And her daughter's like, just go get drunk. And, you just kind of see her like, and again, it's just such a great performance. Just her face kind of snaps back into like, okay, I'm back on. Like, I got to deal with
Mhm.
this. And then, you go have the dance party. Um, but she's got the wedding, and then Luthen shows up, and he's doing all his various murderings. I mean, I like Luthen. I think he's a great character. But I was like, dude, there's more than one way to solve a problem. Like the
Yes.
answer, he just goes straight from like zero to murder. Like that's
Yep.
what he does.
Yep.
He's like, kill Cassian. He did his job. We're gonna kill him. We're gonna kill. I can't think of the bank. Tay.
Oh,
I was just
yeah,
like, dude,
her
there
friend.
are a variety of steps you can take to solve a problem before you just have sent to murder a guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I thought that was kind of out of the four storylines. I thought that was my favorite one. And I think just kind of I think I wrote this as well. It really reminded me of the end of Goodfellas. The scene where like he's in the kitchen, like he's got to
Yeah.
make dinner, you
He's
got
all
the chopper
paranoid.
over the head, he's got to like pick up, if it's picking up drugs or picking up his mistress, whatever it is, just like that frantic energy of it all. And then he gets caught. His kind of release is like, all right, I'm caught. I'm gonna have to cut a deal. Mons is just like, you know what? I'm just gonna get drunk and dance.
Yep. One thing I thought of, it is interesting too how in these first 3 episodes, I had mentioned earlier that Cassian is largely sidelined because he's basically like in prison, so to speak.
Mhm,
But really, the first 3 episodes are about the women of Andor. It's Mon
mhm.
Mothma obviously is a huge component. Dedra has a huge piece. Bix has a big storyline. And I think that's it's interesting because the I think a couple years ago, what Lucasfilm made a bunch of, or maybe Kathleen Kennedy came out with saying the Force is female, right? And
Mhm,
they were really talking about Ray and I think the Acolyte and how they wanted to usher in a new era of Star Wars that wasn't so male centric. And you can quibble about whether or not that was successful, but here with Andor, they're quietly doing that, and I would
mhm,
say they're super successful because the it's not really approached from an agenda, but from the characters themselves, and the stories are rising out of these characters. Like Mon Mothma is someone who is just. I think she does. She just have the one line in the original trilogy about the Bothans.
I think so.
Yeah, and so she was basically a nobody character, and they've
Mhm,
really fully developed her into this complicated person who is giving up everything for the rebellion because she thinks
mhm,
it's the right thing to do, and she's a really tragic character because she has to basically wear a mask at all times with all people. Like she can't even take it
mhm,
off at home with her husband. Her daughter looks at her as like a fraud or
mhm.
embarrassment. and her biggest ally is Luthen, who, like you said, everything he wants to solve everything by killing it. So she is basically isolated, and um, I mean, yeah, she's probably my favorite character on the show just because she has such a rich life. Like
Hmm.
Cassian is all he's just one note. He's all about the rebellion. He has these friends, but it's they're all pushing in the same direction.
Yeah.
Where Mon has she has a real life. Like she has a family and she has obligations and she has a day job and all these things. So it's yeah. I mean that's the biggest surprise. I mean one of the biggest surprises is that they made a prequel of a prequel. So Rogue One is a prequel.
Hmm.
This precedes Rogue One. So now we're like Inception or prequelception, and it's one of the best things that I've ever seen. At
Yeah.
least like period, but even specifically with Star Wars, just because of how rich and nuanced it is. It's not just checking off boxes showing us how these
Yeah.
characters get from A to B, but it's really delving into who they are and why they make the choices they do. Um, just to wrap up, I do want to ask you,
All right.
is there anything about season two that you are concerned about or that isn't quite landing as well for you?
Nothing yet. Actually, one thing I was concerned about that did not come to fruition is I like that the years seem to at least be kind of bleeding over. Like I really
Yeah.
thought it was going to be like, you know, 1 year, and I actually thought it was. I kind of thought it was going to be like 1 year, like just one story or maybe two stories. Like I
Mhm.
did not think they were gonna kind of keep four storylines going. And obviously, like Gorman is still going to happen. So I
Yes.
like that they're doing that. Um, Nothing off the top of my head that
How do you feel
raises any
about
red flags.
I'm going to ask you a leading question. How do you
All
feel
right.
about the pace? So season one famously starts slow,
Mhm.
and before it picks up, I would say season two, apart from the very beginning with Andor and the tie, it also starts slow.
I have seen this, and my response to season 1 and my response to anybody who says this about season 2 is Andor is deliberately a slow burn.
Yes. Yep.
I kind of likened it to a John Le Carre novel where there's a lot of setup. It's not James Bond, where it's all action.
Yes.
John Le Carre
Yep.
is much more, it's deliberate, it's slow, and then when there is violence, it's kind of very sudden
Yep.
and
Yeah.
deliberate.
And that's
Um,
realistic. That is
yeah, yeah,
realistic.
yeah. I mean, as realistic as we can be about a show with spaceships.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think the pacing is fine. I like it. I'm still deciding if I like the release schedule or not.
Yes.
Um,
Okay. Yep. I'm hung up on the same thing. I
I
think yeah.
I kind of wish they did it like they did see because when you go back and watch season 1 in retrospect, it's more or less the same thing. Like you
Yeah.
have the first 3 episodes are him on Ferrex meeting Luthen and leaving. Then you've got Aldani. Then you've got Narkina 5, and then you've got Narkina 5 maybe goes 4 episodes, but then you've got the end back on Ferrex. Like it's still four separate um stories,
Yeah.
or episodes, however you want to call it. So I don't think anything would have been lost by releasing it as 12 episodes versus or 12 weekly episodes versus how they're doing it now.
Yeah. I would agree. I think I do have a slight issue with the pace. I think the of the first couple episodes. I think we spend a little too much time with the redneck rebels.
Yeah.
Like I got the gist, and then it's like, oh, these guys again, and like they're still arguing, and like, yeah, I mean, I loved it that they solved their differences by playing rock paper scissors. That
I
just
love
said
that as
everything you need
well.
to say. But I think that and like the two times I was kind of like, okay, I get it was with the Redneck Rebels, and then with the wedding when they showed us the entire first dance. I was like,
Hmm.
you could cut away. Like I don't need to see all this. Like I would rather spend more time with the Imperials talking genocide. Like I don't need action. Give me talkie. Like but
Right.
make it meaningful. And those are two places where I kind of felt myself checking out a little bit because it started to drag just a little bit, and I'm there for the ride, and I'm willing to take it for what it is. But those were the only real quibbles I had. I think my biggest concern going forward is, like you said, the release schedule. I would much rather it be a 12-week thing because I want to enjoy this. I don't want to
Yeah,
just gulp it down. I want to just
yeah,
enjoy it as it, as long as I can, because shows like this don't come along. But tied to that, I'm a little concerned about, so each of these 3 episode arcs are going to take place 1 year apart.
right.
So the first set was for BBY, which is before Yavin, if you don't speak Star Wars, and Yavin is the Battle of Yavin, which is
I,
essentially when the Death Star shows up and Luke blows it up. Just so we're all talking the same thing.
I really wish we could move on to a better timekeeping. Like,
Yeah,
why don't we do before use Order 66 would be a much better like
it would be.
demarcation line.
Or yeah,
But,
or the birth of Yoda. Let's count
yeah.
from BBY
BBY,
would
there
be
you go.
before Yoda, BY
Yeah.
before Yoda. But yeah, I think my only real concern is that I don't know how well it's going to stitch together. So like
Mhm.
you said, in season one, we did have these 3 episode arcs. They more or less happened chronologically, like
Yeah.
within a close time frame to each other for the
Yes.
most part. Granted, Cassian's in jail for a while. You understand that. I do wonder how cohesive it's going to feel when we're jumping a year between each little story chunk, and each
Mhm.
story chunk is confined to like a 3-day window. So basically, it's like Friday, Saturday, Sunday in a given
Right.
year, and then next year we're going to pick up with the characters and see where they are. I do worry a little bit about, are we going to spend too much time like clearing our throat in that first episode, like being like, this is where we
Right.
are now. Granted, I trust Gilroy. He's a great writer, and I trust his team, but I do wonder
Mhm.
if we're going to lose a little narrative thrust as we kind of keep resetting the table. Um, so that
I
kind of
guess
remains to be seen, and that's really the only thing that's kind of in my mind, is like, how is this
uh,
going to is it going to feel like a cohesive story like season one did, versus like these individual pieces that form a big story but are almost
mhm.
more like episodes, right, of an ongoing thing.
Well, I guess we'll find out tonight how well it
Yes,
flows together.
yes, we will. Yeah, I guess that's probably a good point to end it on. Did you have anything else related to Andor or anything else?
I did enjoy. There was a little bit of an Easter egg in the wedding when they present the statue. There's a little Knights of the Old Republic 2, 1 or 2. Knights of the Old Republic 1 with the Rakatan or whatever they're called, the aliens from Knights
Oh,
of the
the
Old
aliens.
Republic when they said
Uh-huh.
at the end with the Starforge when they said, "Oh, this statue was stolen by them." I think so.
What do you
So,
think of, here's a random question. What do you think of the fact that I don't think there's a single alien in any of these episodes, other than there's one guy in the background at the wedding. He's like kind of almost has an odd shaped head. He's totally bald and he's got sunglasses on. Other than him, I don't
yes,
think there's a single alien in any of
I
these episodes. And most
I
of season one didn't have any aliens either.
yeah, I don't think there were any in the Rebels. I mean, the Empire, Palpatine was a famous space
Oh yeah, of
racist.
course. Everyone
So,
looks, and they're all speak with a British accent. Like, yeah,
unless
I
you're
mean,
Thrawn, you're a no-go. Yeah, so there wouldn't be any there. Yeah, maybe a couple. Yeah, there weren't any on the
it's
were there
interesting
any on the
because
Wheat Planet?
I don't remember any. It's
I don't
interesting
remember.
because like you would think, and obviously this plays out in the future with the rebellion, that a lot of the ground forces, or a lot of the organizations made up of aliens, because they are
Mhm.
the ones that are being suppressed most violently by the empire, because they are basically like a white power organization. And it would
Yeah.
make sense then that you're predominantly the people standing up and fighting would be people who don't look like that. So it is strange that here at the beginning we don't really have any aliens.
Yeah, I want Yeah, you're right. And there really weren't a lot in season 1 now that I'm kind of thinking about it. Like the prison, when Cassian was in prison, it was all humans. Barracks was all humans.
Yeah. The only aliens I can think of were on that, like, Planet Club Med, where
Yeah.
Andor basically like hangs out briefly and gets arrested. There were some
Yeah.
hanging out on the beach.
Yeah,
Um,
that is about it. That is an interesting choice.
yeah, I don't know. It doesn't
Alright.
mean anything. It is just an interesting
Alright.
observation.
Tony Gilroy, if you're watching, come on and explain yourself.
Yeah,
We have
right.
questions.
We have questions. We need to know. All right, Jeff. I think it's a perfect place to wrap up. Thanks for joining me again,
Alright.
my friend.
Absolutely. It was good talking with you. Everyone,
Yeah.
thanks for tuning in
Thanks.
and
Yeah.
listening to us and all that.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for everyone who joined to watch this inaugural edition of this our first our live podcast. So we'll maybe do more of these in the future.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Thanks everybody.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.